I was cave diving when I found something that shouldn't exist. I don't even know why I'm writing this. No one's going to believe me anyway. Hell, I barely believe it. And I was there. I've been cave diving for most of my adult life. It's one of those things that either terrifies you or makes you feel alive in a way nothing else can. Crawling through lightless, half-flooded tunnels of stone with barely enough room to breathe. It rewires your brain. You stop thinking in straight lines. The world becomes narrow and endless all at once. Last weekend, I drove 4 hours out to a site I'd been meaning to explore for years. It wasn't on any official maps, just a whisper passed around in old diving forums. A collapsed sinkhole out in the woods, hidden behind a rusted chain-link fence so twisted with vines you'd miss it if you weren't looking. They said the cave beneath it was alive. I figured they were just being dramatic. I geared up alone. No spotter, no lifeline. Stupid, I know. But the site was so remote that dragging another person out there would have raised too many questions. I didn't want anyone else staking a claim. The entrance was a narrow shaft, just wide enough for me to wriggle through with my tank scraping the sides. The temperature dropped the second I slipped below the surface, the rock slick with something that smelled faintly metallic. It felt like the earth swallowed me. For the first hour, everything went as expected. Tight squeezes, shallow water pooling in strange veined patterns on the floor. My flashlight cut thin white beams into the blackness, carving out tunnels only a few feet at a time. Then I found the passage. It wasn't like the others. The stone around it looked wrong, almost porous, like coral or old bone. When I ran my glove over it, the surface felt soft, almost pliant. I should have turned back then. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to turn back, but curiosity won out. I pushed through. The tunnel narrowed and dipped sharply down, forcing me into a crawling descent. The walls pressed so tight against me, I could feel my own heartbeat vibrating in the stone. I kept telling myself it was just rock, just empty space. That was before the breathing started. It wasn't mine. It wasn't human. It was deep, wet, and rattling, like something with too many lungs, struggling to pull air through 1,000 crooked throats. The sound echoed through the tunnel ahead, growing louder the deeper I went. I should have backed out. I should have scrambled for daylight, no matter how tight the space got. Instead, I crawled toward it. The tunnel opened into a wider chamber after what felt like hours. My flashlight beam shivered across the walls, and that's when I saw it. The walls weren't rock. They were made of flesh. Pale, rippling tissue that stretched across the ceiling and floors, pulsing with a slow, sluggish rhythm. Veins as thick as my arms throbbed beneath the surface, branching out like the roots of some impossibly huge tree. And in the center of the room, something moved. At first, I thought it was a pool of water. It shimmered and shifted like liquid, but then it began to rise, pulling itself upward in long, stringy strands, forming a rough, heaving shape. No eyes, no mouth. Just a roiling mass of translucent, worm-like tendrils that groped blindly at the air. And it smelled, a wet, rotting stink that clung to my skin, soaked into my suit. I was frozen, completely paralyzed. My body knew something my mind hadn't caught up to yet. It wasn't just living tissue. The whole cave was alive, and it was waking up. I tried to back away, slow, quiet, no sudden movements. The thing in the center was still assembling itself, its tendrils weaving together in twitching, nauseating patterns. I figured if I was careful enough, if I didn't make a sound, I could slip back through the tunnel before it noticed me. I turned, crouching low, moving one hand at a time toward the way I came. The light from my flashlight jittered across the walls, making the veins in the flesh-pitted stone look like they were writhing. I fought to keep my breathing steady, fought to ignore the way the walls seemed to tighten with every inch I crawled. Then my foot slipped, just a little, just enough for the heel of my boot to scrape against the wet surface, and that tiny sound, that tiny scritch was enough. The creature stopped moving. It froze mid-assembly, tendrils stiffening like a marionette pulled taut on invisible strings. A low, wet clicking sound echoed through the chamber, vibrating through the stone, and the walls responded. Veins bulged. Flesh shuddered. The entire cave seemed to lurch forward in one slow, slithering motion, like a body trying to force itself through its own skin. Panic took over. I abandoned any idea of stealth and lunged for the tunnel mouth, my hands clawing at the slick walls, my knees scraping raw against the stone flesh. I half crawled, half swum into the narrow passage, my flashlight bouncing wildly and plunging the tunnel into jerking shadows. Behind me, the breathing grew louder, faster, hungrier. Something heavy slithered after me, wet tendrils slapping against the stone with a sickening, rapid rhythm. The tunnel was too tight to turn around. I couldn't see it, but I could feel it, the vibrations rattling through my bones. I kept scrambling, dirt and mucus-slick stone filling my gloves, my gear catching on the narrowing walls. Every second counted. Then the tunnel shifted. I don't mean it branched off, I mean it moved. The stone flesh around me flexed, like a throat constricting. The opening I had come through twisted sideways, folding into itself. The way back was gone. I crashed into the dead end, my helmet striking the wall with a sharp, hollow thunk. Pain spiked down my neck. I whipped around, trying to shine my light behind me, and I saw it. The thing had almost filled the passage. It wasn't chasing me with legs or arms. It was dragging itself forward on 100 writhing filaments, each one tipped with tiny, grasping claws. And it was smiling. Not with a mouth, there was no face, but the ripples across its form shaped a crude, mocking grin. It didn't just want to kill me, it wanted me alive. The walls pulsed again, tightening, the fleshy stone squeezing inward like a hand about to crush a bug. My flashlight flickered once, then died, and in the pitch black, the breathing closed in. I forced myself to move, one hand at a time, fumbling across the rippling, mucus-slick floor, desperate to find anything I could use. A loose rock, a broken shard of old equipment, anything. My fingers brushed against something hard, something sharp. I didn't even think. I grabbed it, the edge slicing into my glove and nicking the skin underneath. Pain flared in my hand, sharp and grounding. Good. It meant I was still alive, still fighting. I jammed the shard into the wall. The fleshy stone screamed. It wasn't a sound, more like a vibration, a high-frequency pulse that rattled my teeth and made my nose bleed instantly. The wall writhed under the impact, veins spasming and pulling away from the wound like worms recoiling from salt. I stabbed again, and again. Each hit tore more of the pulsing tissue apart, revealing layers underneath. Slick, twitching muscle, then wet bone, then something that looked like a vast network of tangled nerves. The whole tunnel shook. From behind me, I heard the thing shriek, a gurgling, chittering noise, like thousands of tiny mouths tearing open at once. It was coming faster now. No more slow, deliberate dragging. It knew what I was doing. It knew I was hurting it. I dug the shard in deeper, carving a rough hole through the wall. My hands were slick with blood, mine or the cave's, I couldn't tell. The air tasted metallic and foul, thick with rot and something sharp like burnt hair. The hole widened just enough to see a faint glimmer of light beyond it, cold, bluish light. Not daylight, something else. But it was an exit, or at least, not this. I shoved my body into the gap, feeling the fleshy membrane tear around me, sticky strands clinging to my suit. The cave tried to pull me back, veins snaking around my legs, tendrils lashing at my arms, but I fought harder, kicking, tearing, screaming into the pitch-black air. For one terrible moment, I felt hands, not tendrils, hands, grabbing at my ankles. Thin, brittle fingers with too many joints, clawing, pleading. I didn't look back. I tore myself free, half falling, half crawling through the ragged hole, into the unknown light beyond. I hit the ground hard on the other side, sliding across slick stone. My flashlight, miraculously still strapped to my wrist, sputtered back to life with a weak, shivering beam. And I saw where I was. Not another chamber. Not freedom. A nest. Hundreds, maybe thousands, of those same fleshy tendril creatures, all slumped in tangled heaps along the walls, sleeping, shuddering softly in rhythm with the breathing pulse of the cave. They hadn't seen me. Not yet. But one of them, the closest one, twitched, and slowly began to stir. I stayed frozen, barely breathing. The creature closest to me slumped back down, its twitching subsiding into slow, wet convulsions. Around it, the others continued their rhythmic pulsing, a grotesque mimicry of sleep. I had to move. As I edged along the wall, my flashlight's weak beam swept across the stone, and I saw it. Markings. Deep grooves, almost invisible against the pulsing flesh stone, spiraled across the surface like scars. Arrows, symbols, a path carved by someone before me. I followed the markings with my eyes, tracing them to a darker corner of the cavern. Then I saw it. The massive thing at the center of the nest. It wasn't like the others. It was huge, rooted into the floor by thick cords of veined flesh. Its skin stretched taut over a skeleton too angular, too wrong. Its head was a mass of writhing tendrils, shaping crude impressions of faces, grinning, weeping, screaming. It wasn't breathing, it was dreaming. And the whole nest pulsed in rhythm with its dreams. If it woke, all of them would. I edged toward the carvings, my every step a fight against my own shaking body. Halfway across, the tendrils along the ceiling shivered. The massive creature twitched, the nest stirred. I stumbled the last few feet to the far wall, found a fissure hidden behind the markings, and squeezed through just as the nest exploded into motion. Tendrils lashed, bodies screamed. The massive thing in the center began to unfold. I forced myself upward through the narrow stone shaft, kicking at grasping fingers, clawing at slick stone, until I burst into the open, collapsed onto cold, wet grass. The sinkhole behind me was silent. The sky above was purple with dawn. The breathing was gone. For now. I don't know how long I lay there. Eventually, I staggered back to my truck and drove. I didn't look back. I haven't gone near that place since. But sometimes, late at night, when the world is quiet and I can't sleep, I swear I can still feel the breathing. Soft at first, like the pulse of a distant tide, getting closer. I moved last month, packed up everything, left the state. It didn't help. 2 nights ago, I found something on my living room floor. A wet, pale thread about the length of my finger, still twitching. And last night, when I pressed my ear to the wall, I didn't hear the sounds of the city. I heard the stone breathing. And this time, it wasn't just calling my name. It was whispering how to find me.